Okay, I think we're live. Okairi, welcome back to my channel, Made Between the Pages. My name is Taylor, and today we have a very exciting live stream. So I don't know if you all are aware, but Steve Talks Books and PL Stewart, who is on this stream right now, both host a podcast and interview series on YouTube called Page Chewing, where they invite creatives and authors from the book world to come on and share some stuff about themselves, what they do in the community, and just chat. So I am very lucky today that Steve has bequeathed his host status to me for the day. So I have two lovely creators along with PL below. We have Vera Wylde and Megan Alnico with us today. Would you guys care to do a little self-introduction to let us know who you are and what you do in this space?
I'll go first, I suppose. So yes, my name is Vera Wylde. I have a number of podcasts, the largest being Council of Geeks, where I talk about geeky media, mostly movies and television, but also issues of LGBTQIA plus representation and tropes in media. I also have Break Room of Geeks, which is unscripted review material, and also the Vera Wylde channel, which is more about my existence as a gender fluid person. If you couldn't guess that something was a little up with just how I'm looking at the moment. And I have also at this point self-published 3 works, 2 under Vera Wylde and 1 under Nathaniel Wayne. Under Vera Wylde, I have published a part autobiography, part self-help book called Skirting Gender, which is about this. And I also have a 2-act play called When She Wakes, and I have a fantasy novel called Dreams of Fire that came out just last year. And as I said, that one was published under Nathaniel Wayne. Both of which are my name. Neither is a dead name. That question happens sometimes.
Well, hi, everyone. I probably should have gone first because my list is nowhere near as extensive as Vera's. I'm Megan Alnico. I am a software engineer and a author. I wrote Chromospace Conscript, the first of the Chromospace novels, out now, which is a sci-fi space opera stuff. I also host a podcast called Word Crash. It's a creative writing podcast that kind of masquerades as a game show. So we play these little games and stuff and end up writing stories together. And it's very collaborative. It's a lot of fun.
We will have both the books and the podcast linked down below. So you guys can go ahead and check that out, afterwards if you're interested. Super interested in Word Crash. I'm so intrigued. I'll be checking that out ASAP.
I've been on that one. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah? Ooh, even more excited.
Thank you.
And also, for people who are watching, this is on my channel this time. So if you haven't heard of PL, let's have PL, give his introduction as well.
Thanks, Taylor. Hi, everyone. Yep, I'm PL Stewart. I'm the author of the Drowned Kingdom saga. And I also am fortunate to be a blogger with the wonderful Before We Go blog, led by the awesome Beth Tabler, which Taylor is also a member. And, just part of the writing community. Love engaging with creatives and learning things about people and what they write and what they do. And I'm extremely honored to be here. And thank you so much again, Taylor, for hosting, and to our 2 marvelous guests.
Yeah, concur with all of that. Before We Go blog is wonderful. So just to get us started here, all of us clearly have a love of stories, whether it be through podcasts or writing, plays or through novels. And I'm kind of obsessed with people's origin story as to how they came to love stories, the telling of stories. I even have a tag that I created on my channel called the personal canon tag, because I'm obsessed with knowing what stories develop someone's life. So my first question to kind of put out to all of you is, where did your love of stories begin? Like, what is your origin story? What made you into an author? Or was there something that stuck out to you as a kid, be it movies, video games, books? I know for me personally, I was an avid reader as a child, and my parents really prioritized that. So I think that's where I started. But I'd like to hand the question off to you guys, Vera or Megan or PL, anyone's.
I used to read a lot more than I currently do, partly because I have ADHD, and when I was younger, the internet was not very fast, and it was dial-up. So the number of things that could distract me from reading was a much smaller list. So I don't read as much as I used to, but I don't think I could pinpoint a single thing that made me start to be interested in stories. I've been absorbing, books, movies, even video game stories. I remember Final Fantasy VI was one that really it stuck with me as a story that's on the Super Nintendo. But if I were to pinpoint something that made me really appreciate the craft of storytelling, it was probably Neil Gaiman's Sandman. That comic series, which is about a lot of things, but ultimately at its heart, it's a story about the importance of stories, which is the kind of thing that it's real easy to go straight up your own ass doing. But he manages to do it in a way that was really wonderful and beautiful, and made me really appreciate the craft at which he did that work. And I think that's where I really started to appreciate everything that goes into it, as opposed to just thinking, oh, you tell stories. That's just a thing people do, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really. I have thoughts, but we'll continue with it.
I guess I can go next. Let's see. So for me, I was always imagining. Did a lot of pretending as a little kid, and I just never grew out of that. So, when I watch TV, because a product of my generation, we were just pretty much plopped in front of the TV for long segments of time doing, afternoon cartoons and Saturday morning cartoons. And a lot of that kind of just drove into me the idea that you could have fantastic stories. And my dad did read to me Lord of the Rings, which is influential. And, there's certain shows that were influential and different that kind of started me at a young age. It's going to sound so ridiculous, but it turns out that there was this TV show, this cartoon show called The Real Ghostbusters, right? And
that is probably my favorite childhood cartoon. I hope you realize what a nerve you just hit.
Well, there's the thing.
I love that.
It was different. Like, as a young child, I understood that this was a different show because it had something that most shows didn't, and that was continuity. Right? It had continuity. Characters changed over time. They did some plot stuff. I mean, it was still a cartoon show. Don't get me wrong, right? And later in life, I realized that some of those episodes are written by J. Michael Straczynski, who went on to write Babylon 5 and work with the Wachowski sisters, and just all kinds of crazy stuff. And there he was at the beginning of my formative years writing Ghostbusters stories. I have to say, I'd love to say that I'm a voracious reader as a kid, but I was not. I honestly was not. I was documented learning disabled. I was in the lowest reading group. I was constantly told that you're not good at this and you have to continue to focus on the fundamentals. And it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun. For a long time, it actually was not fun, but I still loved stories. And right up until I wrote my book, I didn't think it'd be something I'd ever be able to do, but I wanted to tell a story. So there you go.
That's such an important point. That's why I say love of stories, because I think in BookTube, we do this all the time, I think, but, think of books as like the pinnacle of storytelling. And it's not the case. TV shows, video games, all of comic books, like all of these things are just as valid. So I'm really glad that you made that point, that engaging with stories via different forms of media, there's no book supremacy here, So I really appreciate that. And also I love how the caliber of your Saturday morning cartoons was at that level, because I was a Jackie Chan Adventures girl, and that did not have continuity in any way, shape, or form.
Well, don't get me wrong. There are plenty that didn't. There are absolutely plenty that did it, that I certainly still enjoyed, right? Mm-hmm. But that one just, sticks out to me. That and, Transformers did a little bit of that. I wish Gem and the Holograms had done more of that, but no. So just one of those things.
Not quite. Yeah.
weren't quite to Exo Squad level though. The people who were, yeah, there are people who just go on and on about that cartoon show.
What about you, Pio? I've never asked you your origin story.
Oh, it's not nearly as interesting as Vera Megan's. My mother was never finished high school, but was one of the most literate people I ever met. She, was one of 7 kids, and they grew up fairly poor in the West Indies, but books were the one thing that they had some of, and they would reread. She remember telling me stories. They'd reread books over and over and over again because they only had so many books, and then for the most part, because they were brought up very staunchly religious, half the times that was the Bible, and they'd steer the Bible around between all 7 kids. I grew up with a love of stories and admiring the fact that my mom wrote, which she never published. That was really a big part of my inspiration because, like I said, I thought she was a phenomenal writer. Of course, I'm biased, and she wrote romance, and I love romance. And she never published. She got one rejection letter later on, much later in life, and I was like, Mom, even I knew back then, I was very young. I'm pretty sure you have to write, submit more than once to get a chance to get published. It's like, no, I wrote it. That's an accomplishment, and I'm good. And that also made me very proud too, because just the fact that she was just satisfied with the accomplishment. But I did feel, because I didn't write till way later in life. I first published in my 50s. But I think what happened to me is I was so busy. I had family very young, lots of kids, and I grew up loving fantasy. And I came back and forth with fantasy. I went through a stage where I was mostly reading, the kind of police procedural thriller stuff, but I didn't have a lot of time to read when I was a young adult and an older adult for the most part because it was my family. And then you get to that point in your life where you're almost an empty nester, and you just have that support system around you with my lovely wife, Deb, who's like my business partner. And on top of that, I think what happened is my educational background was English, medieval English, minor history. And I grew up, like Megan said, loving the Lord of the Rings and all the traditional type fantasy stuff. And then between life and things that I experienced and things that I saw, I want to combine my love of fantasy, but yet tell a story that meant something. And I believe that I was inside. I mean, you meet me outside, I think most people say, oh, Paul's a pretty chill guy, he's pretty laid back, blah, blah. But at the same time, I think inside, I won't say it's an anger, but I felt a necessity to tell certain stories because of things that I saw in the world that I didn't like. For example, homophobia, racism, religious intolerance, and all these other things that I really, really got under my skin. And so I wanted to incorporate that with my love of fantasy somehow. Didn't know how I was going to do it. But then I said, well, maybe I'll write a book like this. And I don't know. Taylor's read it, so she gets what I'm talking about. But yeah, that was my origin story, I guess, why I write.
Yeah, I was going to say that makes a lot of sense. The religious aspect that's in A Drowned Kingdom, hearing that upbringing, you definitely brought that in. Read it if you haven't. It's wonderful. I'm just going to put that out there. But yeah, I found it so fascinating how we grow up really shapes, the stories that we tell. In the end, I'm not a writer myself. I don't think that I could. I don't know. It's just not something I think is my calling. But I will continue to engage with everyone's works. And then we have here, I agree that the idea that only non-illustrated text counts as real storytelling is garbage. 100%. I feel the same vibes with audiobooks sometimes if you're really busy and you can only get to an audiobook.
That is the only way
I saw a reaction.
That's the only way I get anything read anymore.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you know what they say, books are stories for when all you want to do is read, and audiobooks are stories for when you have to do everything else but read.
Yeah.
Right.
So here I am doing a million things, cleaning my house, working on other projects that I'm working on, and I put that on and I can listen to a book. I mean, it's all the same words, happens to be audio. It's all the same words. They didn't cut anything. It's the story. And so, you sit there and you experience that audiobook, and I can go through dozens of books now, where before I'd have to sit down. I couldn't do anything else, and we all have busy lives. So, it's a real luxury for me to be able to sit down and read a book as opposed to doing the audiobook thing. So yeah, it's super important to me. And it's super important that I get my book into audiobook form. I've got someone recording stuff, hopefully right now.
Fingers crossed.
Have fun editing that. I had really thought I was going to have the audio book version of my novel out months ago. I'll be lucky to have it out by the end of this year at the rate I'm getting this dang thing edited.
That kind of sparks questions for me, because as someone who edits videos, I spend so much time editing out unnecessary breaths, like moments in between. And editing takes way longer than you imagine it would. God forbid you cough or something, and if it's in the middle of a sentence. So I'm wondering, in the audiobook process, since you're, kind of DIYing it, is it to those millisecond cuts as well? Or?
Not, I mean, like, yes, you are doing very fine cuts, but the big thing is you're not cutting out breaths. You're leaving the breaths in because that's the experience of hearing somebody read it. They're gonna breathe. So unless the breath happens in an awkward place, you leave it in, because that's just the normal flow of the speech. But you are gonna find yourself like narrowing down to, tenths of a second. You're finding the exact right severing point between takes, because this is my first time editing an audiobook, so I don't know if this is completely standard. But my narrator, she had given me basically 4 takes per paragraph. So I need to go through those and pick the best take, and then cut out the rest and insert the one I'm working with, and make sure that it lines up and it flows with whatever ones I've gone before. And every now and then I have to pick a take that maybe isn't my favorite, but it flows better with the other ones that I've already picked. And it's a process.
Yeah.
I too do a lot of audio editing for my podcast, because Word Crash is very spur of the moment. You come up with ideas and things, and sometimes that means people stutter, and sometimes people say things and we're like, that's not a good idea. Let's take that out. That's why we wouldn't do it live. And so I'm doing a lot of editing for stuff like that. And I started using something called Descript, something like that. Basically, it's AI that, we use that term too lightly. I'm sorry. It's a very advanced audio analysis program that translates everything you said into words and then lines up those words with the audio. So if you want to take a word out, you just highlight it and remove it. So if you want to remove every for an entire paragraph, you just type find delete, and it, just like using Word or something like that. And most of the time it works well. There's you can get in and tweak things, and I do have to tweak things because unfortunately I'm very meticulous in my podcast, probably way more meticulous than I should be. But I just like everything to be nice and neat, and because it has the trappings of a game show, right? There's this kind of polish you expect from a game show. And so, I like to put that's the kind of thing I like to put together. But Descript is incredible. Whether it's helping me or not, I still don't know. But if you had 4 takes, you just read through and then delete the ones you don't want, and then they should line up. I don't know. I'm an idea.
I don't trust technology enough. So yeah, because the thing is, I would be so paranoid of it doing something wrong. I would have to go back through it manually anyways. So
I just want to say Word Crash is amazing. I had the privilege of being invited by Megan on work. It's phenomenal. She was so patient with me. I screwed up so many times, and I feel bad for how much she had to, how much editing she probably had to do. So thank you for that, Megan. But yeah, it was a blast. Like, that's probably the most fun I've ever had doing anything, on, that's recorded, right? So yeah, it was just amazing. So,
well, thank you very much.
I feel like anyone who makes content is going to be really forgiving of messing up, because I recorded a video yesterday, and let me tell you, you would think I didn't know English. Like, the number of takes I had to do for this damn video, and it's my own recording by myself. So I think people who create stuff or have to edit their own stuff, I find are much more forgiving of when you make a mistake because they know the feeling.
Oh yeah.
You know, I'm editing Taylor's gonna hate herself because I have a lot of raw footage to go through to figure out which one I like. For sure. So go ahead, Pia.
No, go ahead. You had a question, please go ahead. Oh no, I want to ask for Megan. So, when it comes to your what you produce in terms of Word Crash, your online content, your how do you what made you want to do that, and how do you feel now that you've been doing it for a while, like in terms of its impact, and like how is that going?
So like for me, I love to talk, and I don't always have someone to talk to. So a camera's as good as anything else. Like I'm an opinionated person with a lot of thoughts, and I also have a tendency to understand the side of an argument that I don't agree with. So like I can't effectively have an argument by myself. Where I lay out my own thoughts. I'm like, now I understand this other perspective, and I'll lay all that out and try and be fair to it. And then I'll be like, and here's why it's wrong. But I've just from the experience of growing up as an only child with ADHD, I got very used to basically geeking out and having conversations with myself for all intents and purposes. So just starting to translate that into talking to a camera and editing that into something workable was not a huge leap. I say that though, I've been doing this for a decade now. So obviously it was a period of long and slow refinement to get to where it is now. But just as someone who just frankly likes to talk, it comes almost frighteningly naturally to me at times.
I can sympathize with being an only child who has interests different from her friends because, I was into the nerdy stuff, and where I grew up, it was I've talked about this in other podcasts, but it was not cool. Okay. And I may kind of be a little bitter that it's now cool, but when I was younger, I definitely sympathize with, having the conversation essentially with yourself. I also find it very easy to talk to a camera. So, most days. Some days I forget English, but most days I could sympathize with that. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting because this is the first time I think I've been on video for anything. So
My
here you go.
Oh.
I've done audio stuff.
You heard it here, folks.
Yeah.
Exclusive.
Yeah,
How lucky am I?
Yeah, my first appearance here. I say that, but I really enjoy improv comedy. Right? I'm going to say this. Don't take it the wrong way. I took classes at Second City in Illinois and in Chicago, and that was fun. But it was just classes. Don't take that. Just took some classes in improv. It was a lot of fun. I came out here to Portland. I took some more classes in improv, and then the pandemic hit, and there was no place to perform. So it became, I wrote this book, and I know one author in my entire life, the person who did my editing, Erin Gallagher, fantastic author on their own. And how am I going to meet other people? What am I going to do? So I thought, how about a podcast? And I realized that I could not even pretend to do a podcast that's actually about the craft of writing. I'd written one book. What do I know? Right? Probably not a lot. I don't have an English degree. I have a computer science degree, right? What I probably don't know anything. So what can we do? We can have something fun and just do the creative part. And so that's where Word Crash came from. A bunch of little games to play, to be creative. And then we talk about, what people are doing. And we do have a section where we talk about stuff that might come up in this podcast, right? What's the craft of writing? What are people doing? But I'm asking them because I don't know.
That's amazing. Another only child here. So, funny enough.
Hey, 3 of us in one room.
Yeah.
That's kind of rare.
But I can definitely say with Megan's, I definitely see like her background instead of comedy comes out, and it's just phenomenal. And you know, I it's really the most unique like thing I can always say that I've done since I've been involved in the writing community is Word Crush. It's just something really phenomenal about it. And I also want to comment about Vera. If watching Vera's content, like I would have said if I didn't, and I don't obviously don't know Vera very well, but I would have said law background, because the way Vera, as she aptly pointed out, presents such a fulsome, you know, like all sides, right? You know, I've watched quite a few of her Council of Geek videos now, and you know, the most recent one I watched, like in my mind sticking out, the Don't Say Gay one with Disney, and the coding one that was a while back. Just you know, the way she presents, you know, hey, well, you know, if you think this is the reason why this is like this, here's the other side of the argument. Yeah, I would have said the background would have been, and you're extremely insightful, so I would have said the background would have been law if I didn't know any better. So.
Hey, my degree is in nothing. I didn't finish college.
You know what? That's honestly the best answer you could have given there.
Yeah.
That's not a recommendation. I do recommend people actually finish college. I did not. My life imploded, and there was a lot of splash damage.
But again, just goes. I talked about my mom. Never finished high school. You know, busy raising younger siblings. To me, obviously, one of the most knowledgeable people I know. Same with someone like Vera. Like formal education is obviously not the be all and end all, right? People like Vera, like my mom, are living proof, right? So.
Thank you.
I firmly believe by the fact that school is not for everyone. Like I have friends as well who decided it wasn't for them, and they're doing just fine. You know, it was for me, but it's not for everyone. So, you know, I firmly stand by that as well. That kind of goes with the elitism that can come with books as well. I feel like books and
don't get me started on that. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, have at it if you want, but
yeah, go nuts, Megan.
Well, so, you know, being outside the industry, you know, being someone who was trained in entirely different methodology for creating things than writing, there's this thing where you have to do it. You have to do it every step of the way. Like when we're deploying software, we're writing the software, we're testing the software. If we haven't tested actually giving it to the customer, we haven't tested everything. And this is something that, you know, that elitism that you were talking about, just it got to me when I was trying to publish my book. Basically, people were like, "Oh, you got a story? Cool. Did you get an editor?" "Yeah, I got an editor." Right? "Okay, well, maybe it needs another editor." "Okay, maybe I'll get another editor." But the thing was, there's this navel gazing that goes along with it, and you can try to refine something until it's perfect, but eventually you have to say, this is done. This is the best it's ever going to be. And if somebody else doesn't like it, that's okay. I'm pushing it forward anyways, because you have to get to the end. You're never going to know what the actual, you know, how do you get a cover for a book? How do you actually promote your book, right? You could spend 20 years writing that book every single day. And if you don't move to the last step, you won't know how to do it, you know? And so the idea that people are trying to hoard this idea that they won't be good enough, right, if they don't do it, right, is so juxtaposed against the idea that we need to practice our craft in order to do it well, just seems crazy to me, right? And everything else
you hit
I
on
do,
so many nerves with that in a great way. Please continue.
Thank you. Yeah, in so many things in life, you practice and you do better, right? So get that thing out there and do it. You know, that perfect idea in your head, or that thing you've been working on, it's only perfect because it's in your head, because nothing's perfect. So get it out there, see who likes it, do better the next time, do it again and again. And this idea that you can study your way to perfection, right? That you can continually refine that thing until it's absolutely perfect. And everyone who reads it will agree. It's just this trap that I saw these people who are like, you know, I have a master's degree in English, or, you know, they literally teach creative writing. I'm like, yes, I would appreciate feedback. But at some point, it's done, and I have to accept that and move on. In software, we say it's time to stop starting and start finishing.
Mm-mm-mm.
And
That's a great way to put that.
Yeah.
It's so funny you bring that. Oh, sorry, Vera.
I was gonna say it's funny. My big lessons when I was writing my novel kind of came from the starting end of it, is in that I realized that the way I tend to think about stories in my head had me questioning for a while whether I even had a book length story, because it's funny. I think this probably comes from having a background and a lot of experience in theater and trying to make it as an actor for a while. I gravitate towards dialogue. It's almost always the first thing that I write. It's what's easiest for me to write. And when I think of a story in my head, I tend to think of it as the dialogue scenes, and my head kind of yada yada yadas what's in between. So it's like, okay, so there's this dialogue scene between these characters, and then this stuff happens. Then there's this dialogue scene. And when the story was in my head, before I actually wrote the thing out, I did not appreciate how much stuff was actually in between the bits that were very clear to me. And then when I actually wrote the thing out, I'm like, oh, damn, that is a book. Oh, okay, cool. That's great.
Non-linear, right? A lot of it is non-linear, I think.
Well, the creation process certainly is. The book itself is pretty straightforward, but in terms of creating, like I will usually write out dialogue scenes first and then do connective tissue later, and like obviously revise the dialogue once I get to it, because something's probably changed along the way. But I definitely I will write out the things that are most important to me in whatever order occurs to me, but then from there I will connect A to B. I will write it out linearly from there. Because I have to know where I'm going. Every time I've tried to write something where I didn't know what the ending was, I've stalled out every single time. I have to know where it's going. Maybe the route there will not be what I think it's going to be, but I have to know where I'm going, or I will absolutely stall out.
Yeah, I have the same kind of thought process. Like Megan, when you said your background is in improv, it triggered some memories of me trying to do improv in high school, and it is not my forte, let's just say, and I have I'm a planner. PL has shown me I'm not really a planner, because if you want to see a planner, PL's got this covered. But the way that I think is also more structured in that regard. So I feel like for me as well, even if it's just a video or, I have a hard time starting if I don't know at least where I'm planning to finish. Not that it'll end up there, but I need to kind of have an end goal in sight as well, for my creative process. But I think it differs from person to person, but I felt that. Definitely felt that.
I don't need an ending. I don't need anything. I'm just going to write, and it's going to be scene 1, then scene 2, then scene 3, and then scene 4. Now, sometimes I then go throw some stuff away at the beginning because I'm like, oh no, this is the better direction to go. This is it. This is the better direction. This is it. But I just write the first scene and the second scene, and then, go back later. Sure, I go back later and fix things, but like improv, for me, it's getting over that feeling of shame. It's just getting to the next page. Don't be ashamed of what you just wrote. Oh, it's terrible. Whatever. Get to the next page. The next page will be better. Whatever. The next page will be better. When you go up and do improv, it's like someone gives you an offer, right, of a particular phrase or something you're supposed to start from, or they're posed in a particular way, and you have to figure out a scene based on how they're posed. Is there a wrong answer? No, there isn't a wrong answer. And there isn't a wrong answer for your next page either. Right? Just write the next page and don't overthink it. At least those are the things I had to tell myself in order to get through this, because otherwise all those inner voices would be like, you can't spell. Why are you writing a book? You were in the lowest reading group. Why are you writing a book? Stuff like that.
Well, the part of that absolutely rings true for me is that you don't go back. You keep moving forward, because like I say, I'll come out with a bunch of stuff that's along the way and then go back. But once I've started from the beginning and moving forward, I have to keep moving forward. And if I think what I wrote just sucked, I'm like, you will come back and fix that in the edit. And if it's as bad as you think it is, then maybe you'll scrap a chapter. Don't worry about that now, because the easiest trick to fall into is for someone to like write a chapter and then just go back and start reworking that chapter. I'm like, you don't revise until you have something finished first.
I completely I agree, and there's elements of both what Megan first said that are so spot on for me, because I mentioned in the previous podcast, I frequently write the ending to novels first. I write the last chapter of the novel, the end, like the last, the wrap up, the denouement. I read that first, and then I go backwards, and I write the scenes that I like, and like Vera said, often I think cinematically, so I picture this dialogue between these two characters or this scene, and I write that because it's cool and it's fun, and then I tie it like Vera said, that I tie it all the other stuff together, and you string together this book. I wish though overall I had more of the spontaneity that Vera refers to, because I am so much of a planner when it comes to, at the end of the day, this is what the book's going to look like, this is what's going to happen, this is the ending. And I don't just plan it out for one book. I plan that out for, I've planned out 20. So, I probably need a bit more spontaneity in my writing. That said, there are characters, I'm not sure if Vera and Megan feel this way, but I have had characters that basically they demand agency and they take over this, and they weren't supposed to be as prominent, and they're like, hey, you need to give me more airtime here, buddy. And it just happens.
Yes, but the opposite happened. I had characters who I would love to have kept around in the story for longer, but I could not justify them staying around. Like, they're not going to stick around through this. They're not. I cannot justify this person still being here, or I can't justify bringing this person in any earlier. I wish I could. I love writing them, but they have no business being other than where they fit into the story.
I love when people talk about stories like living things. Yes, absolutely. I love that.
I've had characters that have stood up and demanded to be seen. I'm currently in the second book of my series called Renegade, so Chroma Space Renegade. And there's a character who, I introduced to exemplify a certain thing. They were there to be like, oh, so it's a callback to something that happened in the first one. You find out who's right. There was an argument back then, right? You don't know who's right or who's wrong. This person is living example that one of those two people were right. And then they started taking over a scene. And that was it. Like that now they're a part of the cast, and I can't imagine how I'd write some of those scenes without them. So
that's amazing.
It just happened.
That's amazing. Go ahead, Taylor. No.
Yeah, well, so this is a question that I put towards people during my Whiskey and Books Live. I have a Whiskey and Books group, so it's a bit more of like a lighter question, but hearing you guys talk about your stories and your worlds about like that they're living things to you, and characters demand things or, don't seem to match what you initially had planned for them. Would you survive in the world that you've created? That's my question for you. So I asked this, like I said, in a very different setting before, and not necessarily as the main character, but if you were a side character or, even AI or, any character in your world, could you survive in it? Because I find myself reading books and I'm like, I'd be dead on day one in this world, because I feel bad when I go fishing. There is no way that I could do this. So I'm curious, as writers who truly this world is something real and tangible to you, do you think you would survive?
So like as the average person, probably. As someone, not like literally my main character, but as someone in the kind of positions and with the kind of circumstances that some of these characters have, I don't know. And interestingly enough, that's actually kind of influenced two of the characters. So I have two characters in this who they're not quite mirror opposites, but they are designed to complement each other. And what they basically are is one of them behaves how I would like to think that I would behave if I was in the same circumstances as they were. And the other one behaves how I think I would actually behave under those circumstances. So, and I didn't initially intentionally think this is what they're going to be, but I realized early on building the characters, I'm like, oh, that's what that is.
That's a really cool way to explore that, actually. Because I read characters and I'm like, I wish I would do that. I wouldn't, but I love the character for doing that. So I've had that experience as well as a reader. But what about you, Megan?
I don't write grimdark, right? I'm sorry, KJ Heroic, who's been on the show a couple times, writes grimdark. Fantastic. All the people from Darkstroke Publishing who've been on the show, right? I don't do grimdark. I know your stuff's wonderful, but I can't personally write that way.
How dare?
I can't personally write that. So there's always a place for someone like me who is just your average everyday person. That said, even if I was tangential to some of these, it would be kind of tough. I'd have to be a pretty because we write about specialists, right? We don't write about generalists, right? These people, they do special things. So I'd probably survive, although someone would have to rescue me at least once. If I got into danger twice, I'd probably be dead. Yeah, it's an action kind of world, right? There's sci-fi space opera stuff happening. There's ship battles. There's possibly superpowers, right? And they're all thrown together, but there's average people living out their lives. So, I mean, this stuff could be happening right now in a galaxy far, far away, and it wouldn't affect me, right? So, yeah, I mean, maybe. As long as I, as the writer, didn't focus too much on me.
Yeah, PL, you answered this before, when it was just chaos. But would you mind?
Oh, yeah. I remember, I think we'd had a few whiskeys when I had this before.
Yeah, it was a mess. It was so fun. It was lovely chaos.
It was a blast. But yeah, so I think for me, I said again, because of the world I write, and again, I apologize. Taylor's read it, so she understands. Because there is so much prejudice and bigotry and intolerance, I would have to live in a certain part of the world that where you can believe love is love. You can appreciate people regardless of their skin color. You can appreciate people regardless of their gender, if they're gender fluid. Like, if I lived in that part of the world, then I'd be okay. If I lived in the part of the world where my main character was very bigoted and where their whole society is extremely homogenous and looks down on everyone else other than them, and they're very monotheistic and intolerant of other religions and all that stuff, no, I wouldn't do too well. I would survive long there. As much as I like to think that, I'm smart enough to find a way and I get it. No, I wouldn't survive there, but that's okay. Sorry.
I remember you saying you had someone once say that, how could you, as someone part of a marginalized group, write a world like this? And I'm like, you're so close to the point. Like, you're so close to the point of this story. Like,
hello,
just a little farther, and you're there.
Hello. Yeah, and that kind of leads into my next question for all of you, for Vera and Megan and Taylor, that I'm going to go on a limb and just say that the four of us are probably people who are pretty upset by most recent world events. I'm just gonna guess.
I think you can.
I think that's. I don't think that's a stretch. You know what I mean? Yeah, just a tad. Pretty PO'd right now in general about all kinds of things. So
incandescent rage might be a better description.
Yeah, like the barn is burned down. Yeah, that kind of. Do you feel that your content for all three of you, content, and specifically for Vera and Megan, that in the future that's going to influence your writing and or Taylor, your content that you post? Do you think that's gonna, this stuff is, because it's percolating so much and we're stewing over it, we're trying to find a way to do something, about it, in our own little corner of the universe, positively, to impact it, to fight back, to,
I mean, yes and no. I mean, the mindset's going to be there no matter what I do. So there's probably going to be some bleed in no matter what. As far as any sort of intentionality, I don't expect it to come up in the, at least the works that are set in the world that my novel is in. Because one of the things I went way out of my way to do was to have it not reflect a whole bunch of real world bullshit. I didn't know if we could swear or not. That
you have free
Hey,
reign. I drop
okay,
the
good.
F-bomb on my channel all the time.
You know, that we're dealing with. So, you know, it is a world where, as far as human society is concerned, racism is not an issue. Homophobia is not an issue. There are transgender people. It's not an issue. Something that my editor helped bring to my attention was I made sure to add references to ramps in addition to stairs, so that it wasn't closed off as an accessibility or mobility thing. I wanted that as much as possible because I wanted the story to be about the fantastical stuff that I was doing. Now, that said, I've written other stuff that is either unfinished or unpublished that has been a more direct correlation and been more directly informed by not good stuff. And actually, it's funny, pretty much everything I've written that isn't intended for novel length, everything that is a shorter or a episodic format is actually pretty dark, or at best ambiguously depressing. It's my long stuff that I think it's like, if I'm going to tell a story this long, I would like to not be sad at the end of it. But when I do shorter stuff, like it ain't happy when I do short stuff. So I feel like I get more of my anger out that way. And as far as my like content on the channel, I think I expect it to largely come up vicariously as media reflecting what's going on gets made, and I'll talk about it through that, because while I don't have a problem using my channel as a political platform, I do still try and filter it through what the channel's supposed to be about, which is geek media. But it'll come up, I'm sure.
More than current effects, more than current events affecting my books, I have the problem where things I wrote that I thought were total fiction aren't. I actually had to change parts of my book before I published it. I talked about, you know, shame and could I ever write this book? It's because I wrote it 10 years ago and I wasn't able to publish it until like last year. Right? It was completely done. And in 2010, when I wrote a section in my book that talked about a protest about rigged elections, it was just fantasy. It wasn't something that you think would actually happen. And by the time I went to publish it, it was such a big deal that I said, I'm changing it. Like, I don't want this to invoke the current discourse, right? I'm not doing it for that. I did it because I thought it would be something so unbelievably unthinkable that people would be like, how could that ever happen? So I just didn't want to do that. So I changed it to people protesting the defunding of public schools. So now you have it on record, like, you know, that's something I don't think will ever happen. And who knows, in 10 years, maybe we'll be talking about that too.
I'm laughing because it's not funny. Like,
yeah, no,
exactly.
Exactly. And so
we laugh because we have no more tears to shed.
Yeah. It's interesting hearing the question, like, would it affect, like, because for me, I don't, you know, you say writing a book over all of these years and then the reality changes. So your book might be taken differently at that time and things like that. Videos they have that same life because they are there forever. But I think they have the ability to stay in that context. Like if you look at the year that it was put up, this is when this person is talking about this thing. But it's interesting for me because when it comes to written platforms like Twitter or something like that, I'm more likely to mention something. But when it comes to a video format, it's not that I don't want people to know my political views, because I'm pretty proud of those. Like, I don't really have a problem with people knowing that. But it's more, I want to have a space for myself and for others where that isn't present. In the way that, Vera, you mentioned in your book, you know, and PL and I have talked about this before too, the author's choice, whether to have it reflect real world issues or embrace the idea of fantasy and for once not have to worry about that. We also talked to Crystal Matar, who's the author of Legacy of the Brightwash, call out. It's amazing. But she specifically made queer people, well, she said it was a happy accident, but queer people are safe in her world, whereas some other real issues are present in the book. But that particular issue is not something she felt she wanted to grapple with in her fantasy world. So I think that, you know, we have to balance, you know, where we bring these issues in, because for me, this space is, I mean, I enjoy it because I get to talk about the things that I love, and other things don't have to filter in all the time. So, but then, you know, I'm full of incandescent rage, to use my own words. So you know, it might spill out during a review at some point. But that balance is hard for me, especially in video format, because I'm not really sure how much I want to let that bleed in, per se.
Well, if you look at the kind of, if you look historically at the kind of popular culture that's consumed in any particular generation, you notice certain trends, right? Mostly that the crappier the world is, the more idealized the fiction that comes out of that time is, right? So if you look, you know, comic books came out post World War II. Comic books were huge. People wanted fantasy. They wanted something else. If you look at the 90s, right, it was all dark and gritty because things weren't that bad, right? When you look at it, it's like, well, Cold War was over. People were taking a breath, and things weren't as, you know, on the brink of destruction as they were in the 80s. Well, you know, at least people felt that way. Reality, who knows? I mean, lots of stuff happened in the 90s, but in general, if you look at it, everything was like gritty and dark and in a world where, you know, all, you know, that kind of stuff. You know, that generation gave us the Punisher as a hero and extreme everything with giant guns everywhere. And that fell out of fashion as soon as people started to realize that there were still problems, you know. And if media gives you hope and you escape from some of the terrible things going on in the world, then that's what you do. And other times it's like, oh no, here's a cautionary tale, because things might be good now, but later they can be worse, you know. So
Right.
It's funny you mentioned the 90s, because I had a podcast for a little while that I stopped doing because it broke me eventually. Because I did read comics in the 90s. I have a long box in the closet of 90s comic books, but I haven't I fell off comics around 97 or so. But I had a podcast for a while called 90s Comics Retrial, where I would reread these things and rate them as either being guilty or quitting them of 90s era awfulness. That being exemplified by the exact stuff you're talking about. Everybody has 50 million pouches and 3 guns, and the guns are bigger than their heads, and the bullets are the size of their thighs, and their thighs are over muscular, but their feet are this friggin' big. And I eventually stopped because I did an X-Men arc, and X-Men in the 90s were so bad. They were so bad. I did Executioner Song, and then I stopped that podcast after that because I'm like, this broke me to have to read this. It's so bad.
You are a brave soul, because I have series that I loved when I was a kid, and I'm like, I'm not going to touch that. I'm just going to leave that in the, you know, the bygone era when I enjoyed it.
Every now and then I'd either find a genuine gem, or I'd find one that was so 90s that it was amazing. Like, I remember there was one, it was Brigade, which was one of 50 million Image comics that came out. One of 50 million Rob Liefeld created something or others. And it was terrible, but it was terrible in the best way. It was like all of the it felt like a parody. Reading it felt like a parody, but it was the actual thing. So every now and then I'd find that and be like, this is gold. This is comedy gold.
I love that.
Is that the one where after like the first 4 issues, they kill all the members of the team, sew them up into one hero?
It might be. I only had the first issue. They do kill one of the team in that first issue. They shoot her in the head. So, you know, I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah.
I don't want to cut you guys off, but I know, Vera, you have to go. You have a hard out soon. So I want to give you a chance before you leave to tell people where they can find you, if they want to, you know, watch your YouTube videos, anything you want to shout out.
All right. Here's the list. It's a lot. I do this for a living and I fill my time. So Council of Geeks, I mentioned that it's the primary YouTube channel where you will find my most refined thoughts on things and new videos every Saturday. There's Break Room of Geeks, which is unscripted review content, where I review things like new episodes of Marvel-related stuff, or Star Wars-related stuff, or Stranger Things 4 I did a little while ago. Also, there is Vera Wylde, which gets updated the least frequently, but is, again, about my experiences as a gender fluid person. Also, you can find Vera Wylde on TikTok, fairly prominent on there as well. On Twitch, I have several things. I stream video games on Twitch on Wednesdays and Fridays. I also have a every 2 weeks D&D group called Quill and Sword. That is also on Twitch. That's on every other Thursday. I have a podcast that I do with Jesse Gender called Jumpgate, where we are watching every single episode of Babylon 5.
And I am so jealous.
Which Jesse has seen before, but I haven't. So it's a rewatch for her and a first for me. This is a follow-up to a podcast we finished a little while ago. That was What the Frell, where we did the same thing with Farscape, which I had seen, but she hadn't. So we flipped it for this one. And that is on the Council of Geeks podcast feed. Oh, and I have a book. I have a novel that came out last year called Dreams of Fire. It is available as a mass market paperback, also as an illustrated edition. You can get it from Amazon, but if you don't feel like making Jeff Bezos any richer, it is available through Ingram. That means that it can be acquired from your local bookstore or library.
Okay, great. Send me that. If this,
Carowin's reminding me. She helps me out. So yes, the other thing that I have another podcast called Tough Like a Girl that I do with my partner, where we review graphic novels and trade compilations of comic books with female leads. And that is on the Fire and Water Podcast Network. That is monthly. Thank you, Carowin. I knew I was going to forget something.
Yeah, so I want to make sure I get all, if not all, most of the links to make sure I put them down below, because currently I do just have Dreams of Fire down below, but I want to make sure people can find you. So I'll get those links.
I will hit you up with those after.
Yeah,
but yes,
please
I do have to go. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, thanks for coming.
Thank you so much, Vera, for coming. It's amazing.
Yeah,
It was great, Vera.
I just want to say quickly, I pass this on to Vera that we need both. We need books, podcasts where we talk about things as we would like them to be, and we envision worlds that we would like to see, and we also need to keep reminding people that, hey, we got some problems. We gotta kind of not forget about these lest they perpetuate. So I think we need both. And we need both for our sanity, right? Our sanity in terms of, hey, I can envision a time when this is not an issue. And we also need to make sense of this. So I definitely think we need both.
And I wouldn't say that my book is particularly fluffy. It's not fluffy. It's just not dealing with the exact same issues that are on topic right now. I wanted to explore different cultures. So I arranged cultures using some metric that we don't particularly hold important. So do I have prejudice? I do. Is it about the color of somebody's skin? No. Right? Is there systemic racism? Absolutely. Is it about anything that you can see about a person? No. So those things are there, but I lean a little bit more in the allegory than the straight out saying, this is the thing. And not because that's wrong, just because I want it to be more subtle in presenting something like that, a little more gentle, a little more, instead of telling someone that this is what the world is like, I would rather put somebody in the head of a person experiencing it. And then as a reader, you're like, oh,
that's how that might feel, right? Yeah.
I don't have a word for that, but that doesn't sound good,
Yeah, that's fantastic, and I can't wait to read it. I'm sorry, I'm stubbornly holding out for a paperback because I want to enjoy your book, and I know for me, I need to. I've got that point in my life where I like what I like, and I need a paperback. I find that my reading pleasure with electronic is just it's gone downhill. Like I said, maybe it's the age, I don't know, but anyways, but yeah, no, and that sounds absolutely phenomenal. That's a book that I want to read. And
yeah,
my book
100%.
And my book is the opposite because I put myself, the main character is bigoted and flawed, and you basically hear how he thinks. and obviously that's for a reason. So sorry, I want to let Taylor get to that.
Oh, thank you for coming, Carolyn. It means so much, that you came to watch.
Yes, thank you.
Enjoy the next event. Vera's awesome. So hopefully see you around later.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Yeah, or I had a comment. Oh, so based on what you said earlier to Megan about how it's the books or the media that we enjoy reflects the opposite of what life is now. We actually did talk about this. I think it was on Steve's channel with AP when he was there during a Friday conversation. But there's a huge influx and demand for cozy fantasy right now. Mm-hmm. And this is after Grimdark has been, the king of fantasy for years and years now. Legends and Lattes or Miss Percy's Pocket Guide, mm-hmm. to dragons and stuff, like all of these things. And I'm part of this trend. I'm like, you know what? That sounds really good to read a book mm-hmm. where no one dies. I'd kind of like that. So I think that's really a valid and astute observation that you made, that it really tends to be the opposite of mm-hmm. how people are feeling at the time.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I was embroiled in all that 90s stuff, and I saw the trend from the 80s to the 90s and experienced, I myself experienced, here I'm dating myself, but I was alive when the Berlin Wall fell, right? I was alive when the Soviet Union collapsed. So, I have those memories, and I know that the whole world took this collective sigh of relief, right? Right before the next big gasp that kicked us in the gut. And that's what it was. All the cool kids were, down on everything. All the edgelords and stuff like that. It's like, oh, does this disturb you? Did I just make you disturbed? And you're just like, whatever, man, whatever. I got tired of it real quick. But it has hung around in a way that I'm not, wasn't always comfortable with. And I love the idea of, I love and I hate the idea where a bunch of people living a cozy life is a fantasy.
Right?
Yeah.
Like where owning a house and, living somewhere where the sun shines and you can breathe the air is all of a sudden something that's, not normal. That's very scary. Millennials in Generation Z have a hard time. I'm almost a millennial, like right at the cusp. So I understand, it's like, are they buying houses? No. Why? Because they don't have any money, right?
I'm a millennial. I can attest.
Right? So,
And for someone like me, who I was born right at the tail end of course, too young to remember this is the last major civil rights movement. The Vietnam War. All that stuff. It is absolutely scary many times to see what's come back around, and someone who I love history, I enjoy history, to see that one of the first things my mother told me is that history always repeats itself. And when you're younger, you're like, mom, and then she's right. and that's I definitely understand exactly what Taylor's saying about there are those times, especially now, and Megan alluded to it, that because things are the way they are, you just want to read about a place where you can have peace, quiet, have aspirations that aren't unachievable. And when I mean aspirations, that is to have food, shelter, safety, basic, Maslow type human stuff. Like, that's very appealing. And, but also too, but what is encouraging though, is that while history may repeat itself, we're still here, and I think one thing that just the act of writing does is affirm the fact that we're still here. We're still writing, we're talking, we're posting, we're doing these podcasts. We're still here. We haven't managed to destroy ourselves yet. So thumbs up. That's a good thing. Right? Even if we implode on each other tomorrow, right now we're still and we're still trying to find these nuggets of the fantastic elements of life, the positive elements, the enriching elements, the elements that, you know, make us smile. And, you know, so I think that's a good thing. So,
100%. I love that outlook. And Sarah's making me laugh because I'm the one who made her read Gunmetal Gods. So she said, after reading a book like Gunmetal Gods, I totally feel like something cozy for my mental health. And so I'm in a chat with Sarah, and she was like, Taylor, the child murder needs to stop. And I was like, yeah. So Gunmetal Gods is one of those books that I think takes the grimdark genre and does something really important with it. So Megan, you're absolutely correct that there are like the edgelords out there that just want you to be disturbed by what they write. But Zama Akhtar, you know, PL and I are lucky enough to know him personally, so we've had a lot of talks with him. And Gunmetal Gods takes those themes and makes you reflect on them. It makes you realize how these themes are present now and the effect that they can have. And it does give you a bit of hope, because when you see the characters kind of figure something out, you're like, you know, like my life isn't that bad yet, but I can, you know, they inspire you to not give up in your own life. So I know, Sarah, I'm so sorry, but maybe we can do a buddy read of Legends and Lattes or something afterwards. But I do think that Gunmetal Gods and Conqueror's Blood, and I haven't read Lightblade yet, but anything in that world, Death Rider as well, it's grimdark that has a purpose to it. It's not just like, oh, look at all the blood, you know.
Well, for me, the defining characteristic, something that makes something grimdark in that way that I'm talking about, like, it's one thing to have a grim world, right? But grimdark not only tells you that having hope is wrong, but it tells you are naive for ever thinking it was something that you should believe in, right? That is truly grimdark. And that's what I'm talking about. You know, in the 90s, that's what it was. You're a stupid, naive fool for thinking anything good could possibly happen, for having hope. And so, you know, there are still those stories out there where there is no hero, everybody dies, you know, and you know, everything is still awful, and nothing you do can ever change that. I was very disappointed because, you know, I used to play Cyberpunk 2099, not 2099. What was it? Oh, Cyberpunk 2020. That's what it was, because we're past 2020, so 2020 can't be the future anymore. They had to change it to Cyberpunk 2077. And you know, I used to play Cyberpunk 2020 as a role-playing game, and I liked it. It was cool. It had this, like, you know, it had the idea of cosmetic effects before video games did, you know, cosmetic things. And in Cyberpunk 2077, there is no good ending. You literally cannot save yourself. There's just no good ending, at least up until the time of recording. There is no good, satisfying ending. There's only terrible endings for your character. And that's the grimdark that I'm talking about, right? You were never going to succeed against the corporations, and you were a fool to even think that you could try. And here's all the terrible things that could happen to you. You have this terrible choice or this terrible choice forever. And, you know, if you have a hero and people have succeeded at something, then I don't consider it true grimdark, you know, because, yeah, but.
So question.
Anyway.
No, that's excellent. So question, Mega. So obviously the nihilistic stuff is probably not something that you want to read on a regular basis, but what is it that you do like to read? You know.
Oh, well, speaking of something that's as close to grimdark without being grimdark, I just got through reading Gideon the Ninth and Harrow the Ninth.
Yeah.
Right? And I was like, 5 stars, you asshole. Right? Oh my god. That's how I felt. Like, it's the first one. I'm like, okay, we're gonna find something out. The second book, we're gonna find some things out. Things are gonna start making sense again. No, it's fantastic, and I hate her. Because now I gotta wait for the third one. But yeah, I mean, I love to read that. Shauna Maguire stuff. I will read every single October Day novel that's all
Yeah.
urban fantasy.
Is
Uh,
that the one with the dawn, the dusk? What's the name of that title? It's a novella by Shauna McGuire. It's not part of the Wayward Children series. Is that? Are they novellas? What you're discussing? Because I've
no,
read the Wayward
these are.
Children series.
Yeah. Oh, I read a lot of the Wayward Children series.
Yeah, there's one that
That's
I've
good
read that
too.
isn't.
But no, October Day I think is her longest running
Oh,
book
okay.
series. It's
So
like
I
around
think
like
that might be
15. It's all about Fae. You know, like she's a changeling.
Mm-mm.
She's half fairy, half human, and she's a private detective. And she goes and has all these really cool Fae adventures. And I've learned so much more about, like, you know, Tuatha Danann and Tilwith Teague and all these different kinds of Fae that I had no idea about, but now they show up in her books. I do love urban fantasy. I mean, I talk about not liking the 90s stuff, but I did play White Wolf games, Vampire the Masquerade, Mage the Ascension, right? I love that kind of urban fantasy setting, as long as I have some hope. So yeah, that's great stuff. Magic 2.0. If you've ever heard the Magic 2.0 books, Off to Be the Wizard by Scott Meyer. Those are
No, never heard of that.
fantastic. It's about a guy who is hacking around on a computer and he finds a file with his name on it. And there's a number next to that name that happens to have his bank account number in it. And he's not in a bank, but he knows that's exactly how much money he has in his bank account. So he puts a 1 in front of it. And then he checks his bank account and he has $100,000 more.
Ooh,
Then
man.
he looks at the next one is his height. So he changes his height and then he's taller. And he gets into all kinds of, I'm not even giving away the book here. That's the first chapter, right? So he finds this file, and hilarity ensues. He gets himself into a lot of trouble.
I love that. And it's such a reflection on, like, in my brain, I'm already going with like social media and how you can change people's perceptions of you, you know. Hey, online I can be 6'4". You can't prove me wrong, you know. So
well, that sounds like some awesome stuff.
Yeah,
it really does.
I could go on and on. I consume a lot of audiobooks, so I even have people who read audiobooks that I'm a fan of, right? So Moira Quirk, who read the Gideon the Ninth novels, right? All the I'm a fan of her work. I'm a fan of Luke Daniels, right? Who's read all the Iron Druid Chronicles books. I'm a fan of I cannot remember her name, but she did Patrick Week's books, the Prophecy Con and the Palace Job, which are great books on their own. But then she just does an amazing job with all the voices, and they've inspired me so much. You know, like the acting, when the acting is great, you know. Anyway,
a narrator can really make or break a story. And for me, I think having different voices is a specific type of skill, and some authors maybe just shouldn't do that and just use their voice. But there are some people who just have a very soothing voice that I enjoy listening to as an audiobook. So this isn't soothing, but I think it matches the character well. As I just listened to the first 3 in the Murderbot series, and the snarkiness of the author there kind of, or the narrator. I'm so bad with names, so I can't even pull out names right now. But whoever narrates that, they are able to have a robotic quality to their voice while also sounding sarcastic, which I thought was a feat. And also the narrator for Daughter of the Moon Goddess, her voice is like silk. Like I could listen to that all day, every day. 100%.
Yeah.
Maybe, Sarah. Maybe.
Yeah.
I can
Justine
leave it in
Iyer.
the description. You're right.
I like Justine Iyer too. Yeah, good stuff. I was trying to look up someone that is exactly the same as what you were saying, like someone who doesn't do voices, but that's just them. And I cannot remember James Marsters, the guy who played Spike in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, right? Him.
Okay.
He does all the Harry Dresden books. And now he is the voice of Dresden for me. It's just he is Dresden. That's it.
Yeah.
You know, he doesn't do a whole ton of voices, but that's fine because he's just him.
So you're Dresden Files fan as well.
I do like them. I do like them. it's really, it teaches me a lesson about, you know, that and October Day, about what happens when you get to 15 novels. You're 15 novels in. Some people don't even want a story to last one novel, right? They want to end it at the end. You know, but now, or 3 novels, or it's a trilogy. It's got to end at the trilogy. No, you keep writing until there's nothing left, right? And Dresd is just one of those, you know,
Thank you,
master
Sarah.
classes in making sure that you keep your character running, and it goes in directions that maybe people don't like, but it keeps going.
I'm a big fan of long series. I'm writing 7 books, right? And I think if you are someone who likes and appreciates character development, if you're a character based reader, then I think a longer if the longer series really work well for you. I think, as Megan alluded to, if you're someone who's very plot based, like get the thing done, let me read it, burn through it, on to the next, kind of forget about, then, you know, and I'm not saying you can't be both. I'm not saying you can't be somewhere in between, but you know, for the people that are on those extremes, like mostly character based or mostly plot based, I think that the longer series definitely favor the character based series, because they typically are looking to attach themselves to, you know, Harry Dresden or you know, name your character Uther de Beverberg or whoever you like, right? And I think that's there's something really appealing, especially seeing a character grow and develop over a long period of time, and seeing them, you know, change before your eyes or grow up before your eyes, if they grow that way, and usually they do. So that's I have a soft spot for that.
I have an example I'd like to say, if people so there's a lot of, I think a lot of authors feel pressure to give an ending to certain books, right? Book series, and many times I find those endings disappointing, right? Mostly because the character dies. Especially because if I were to tell you a story about a young kid who goes off to war, he's on a colony, he's fighting the natives, right? He's got the backing of another big country, and they're fighting, and there's this war, and it's a coming of age story. And if I pitched that to somebody, it'd be like, okay, it's a coming of age story, and it's about the horrors of war in this very colonial kind of era. Somebody'd be like, oh, sure, cool, that's great. And the guy dies at the end, right? And you're like, no, he survives. He goes on the you know, there's a revolution going on soon. He's gonna fight in that war too. Okay, great. All right, great. Yeah. So what does he do? That, well, he fights the first one, and then the second, and then in the third book, he's a general, right?
He's a
general in the army. He's a general in the army, and he's worked his way up, and he leads the battle, and the revolution is successful. And then someone's asked, okay, so he dies at the end of that, right? No, because you know what? We need to shift. There's a total shift in focus. Now it becomes a political thriller because he's the president. He's the president of this new country that was formed. I don't believe it. We're going to follow this person from being, you know, this kid in a war to being a general. Not only does he survive that war, but now you're going to make him president. How many more books are you going to write about this guy? And I'll just turn around and be like, that is George Washington's story. Exactly. If George Washington can live it, then it's not so far-fetched for us to have characters that live that, you know? And the idea that, you know, someone does one great thing in their life and they are a wreck afterwards. Like, I mean, not to call, well, you know what? I'm going to call them out because everyone knows this. Hunger Games. Katniss is destroyed at the end of that. And like, basically you get the feeling she's never going to psychologically recover. And plenty of people survive things like that, right? And that's a struggle that I want to see, right? Just like when someone, like, characters have to die, but it's a shame when the character dying is less interesting a story than if the character had survived. You know, that's one of the things that inspired me to actually write my book. I was reading a book. I'm not going to call out this author because I'm just not. But at the end, it's just one book, and they did all this work, set up this world and all these things, and then it's a terrible ending, and all the really cool people die. and stuff. And then it's just like, but it was more interesting. Oh, and they kill the AI too. And I'm like, you have this amazing AI.
You
And
had to.
I like AIs.
You
Yeah.
do all that.
It would be so much more interesting if you had told that story in the mess that it was, instead of cleaning it up by killing everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know? So,
Yeah.
I think, in fantasy, I think we've fallen into the trap of like, if people don't die, it's like in the last couple of years, it's like if no one dies in a book, it's like, well, yeah, okay, is this even adult fantasy? I think a lot of people have fallen into that trap. But I do think we were talking about this with Ryan Cahill, where he talked about if you kill a character, it has to have meaning, because the readers are gonna know if you're just killing a character. Like, your readers are not dumb. So he wrote a book where it would be unrealistic if characters don't die, but he's like, I'm not gonna cheat my readers, and just say, oh, they're dead, new character, or use it as a plot device, because he said, your readers are gonna know. And it has to mean something. If you're going to spend the time building up that character, their death should mean something. So
Yeah.
he made some really good points there.
Yeah, I'd have to agree, especially if you're killing off a character where your readers are heavily invested in that character. Yeah, if you're going to do that, as Taylor said, it has to be germane to the overall overarching plot, not just even that book. It's gotta play out down the road that it's impactful. George R. R. Martin, for example, I subscribe to that that level of kill your darlings. Like, hey, you know what? This started a war, or this changed the course of history because this one person was unfortunately went before their time, or this alliance was broken because of this death, or something like that, right? So, and I'm a big kill your darlings. In my series, a lot of people are going to die, but I'd like to, hopefully at the end of this series, people are going to go, okay, yep, that I understand why. I understand what happened. I understand why their arc took this particular path, and what that meant to not just the book they died in. And you're not trying to produce that, oh my God, so and so is dead. No, you want to know that, oh, when I get to the last one, ooh, now thinking back, so and so died, and that kind of was a chain reaction instead of this. And I think that's really important.
I think something that you're referring to here is internal consistency. So no matter what your world is, it's got to be consistent. So the reason that Game of Thrones, season 7 and 8 were just the pile of hot garbage that they are, is because they aren't consistent. Like, the whole point was kill your darlings, right? So actions had consequences, and then suddenly everyone had the plot armor of a superhero, of Superman. And if your world established that, ahead of time, if that was the rules of the world, people wouldn't have been as upset. But the problem is, that's not the rules of the Game of Thrones world. And like I said, the people consuming the stories, they're not dumb. They're aware of the rules that you've set up. So I think, for me personally, I think that's one of the biggest reasons, not even the plot points, but just how character arcs ended. And the inconsistency within the world is what made that so bad.
Absolutely. I feel the same exact way about episode 8, Star Wars episode 8. I felt that in their rush to subvert tropes, that they became so inconsistent as to make the rest of the film seem like, well, you questioned it a whole lot more. That whole, oh, we'll just we'll take a ship, jump to light speed, and shred another ship with it. That's great, but if that worked, you could have done it to the Death Star, right? The whole point was there was an aesthetic, right? There was this World War II fighter planes in space was the combat style, right? And to put something forward and be like, oh, hey, we're going to do this thing that's different, well, sure, but it was not internally consistent, and it grated on people. At least it grated on me. So I'm totally down with the be internally consistent, whatever it is, right? If people come back from the dead in your world, right? This is something like if you ever played Dungeons and Dragons, right? I know some people were talking about
Mm.
Dungeons and Dragons earlier. If there's spells that bring people back from the dead, it's really hard to kill someone and
Right.
make it stick. So how do you kill the big
Right.
bad guy? You don't really. They'll bring him back. You know, it's like, oh, you know, someone murdered the king. Cool, just bring him back. It happens every Wednesday, you know.
Right.
But
Right.
that's when internal consistency, you know, bumps up against proper storytelling, right? How are you going to tell a story in that situation? You know, so then people ignore things, and then it's not internally consistent. Then we all get like, well, what's the point? So yeah, absolutely, I totally agree that internal consistency is like super important.
And granted, it is harder with these large franchises, series, where you have this mythos that, you know, and you span all these spin-offs where, oh, we're just gonna focus on this minor character and give them a whole, you know, seven episode series, and then things start to conflict invariably, and things start to not make sense. And wait a minute, because people watch, and you know, you have fans. The whole, you know, definition of fan is people who are, you know, somewhat, you know, involved and even potentially obsessed with the entire series, the canon, everything. There's fans of almost every major book or movie franchise that can tell you exactly what happens in every single element of that franchise. And when you provide that inconsistency in some spin-off series, especially, they're like, wait a minute, that doesn't match up with what you said, you know. So people are watching, like Megan says, right? People pay attention. So, you know, and that's one of the hardest things as a writer, to have to, I think I mentioned this, I think Taylor was on that podcast where, you know,
we can't even remember when we talked anymore. It's all the time.
But it was about, you know, a lot of writers, oftentimes we may hate going back to reread our work. We have to, for editing purposes, make things, especially for running a series, making things consistent, not have plot holes. But part of that is a very necessary exercise to avoid the things that is talked about, right? Because, you know, if you, like Megan said, if you say in book one that, you know, this person can be raised with that. Oh, and then book two, this person. By the time they get to book 5, you start to kill someone off, and you expect, okay, well, are they coming back? They're like, no, oh, they can't. Well, why can't they and not? You know, so yeah, exactly, Megan. Yeah.
I think a series that does this so well is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. Yes. So, like, I am on record that Era 2 is better than Era 1. Fight me. Era 2 supremacy. But I think that Sanderson did such a good job of establishing hard magic systems, and his solution at the end of Era 1 works within that system. And not solution, but the conclusion is not outside of the system or the parameters that he set up. And that's why that ending blows people's minds, because as a reader, you're like, how are you going to do this? Because I don't see a solution. And he does it. And I think this also, talking about spinoffs, Era 2, he wanted to change things. He wanted to make other things available to his characters. So what did he do? He fast forwarded in time and combined the hard magic system with new technology, with new advancements in society. So suddenly things that were not possible in Era 1 are possible in Era 2, and it makes sense, you know? And he was just so smart with that. So now he can continue Mistborn. You know, the 4th one is coming out in Era 2, you know, this year, and everyone's excited because he was able to keep that internal consistency based on the choices that he made. And even though I personally, that's not my favorite series he's written, I like some of his other series in the Cosmere better. I think the reason it stands the test of time and so many people love it is that consistency, you know, the way he handled it.
Fantastic. Absolutely. Even the fact that you said hard magic system, I believe he coined that phrase. And it's an amazing bit of tooling, right? The hard magic system versus soft magic system. And it's been all over the internet now. So I absolutely agree. I actually have an anecdote about Brandon Sanderson.
Brando Sando content. I'm here for it.
Yes. I'm a super fan, you know, of Vin forever though. So, you know, Era 1 over Era 2. I just like my girl.
You have to get off now. We're fighting.
Oh, all right. Well, so I was writing, and it turns out, like I said, 10 years ago, when I was first trying to write this book, I couldn't get anybody to read it. because I think we all know the only thing harder than writing a book is getting people to read it. Nobody's interested ever, right? So I mean, not casually. We get on here, you know, you got to find your audience, I guess I'm saying. I digress. Turns out Sanderson's on Reddit. He's literally named Mistborn. And at the time he was checking his Reddit. So I sent him a link one day and I'm like, hey, I'm struggling. What do you think? Right? He got back to me.
You're
and he
kidding
said,
me.
No, he got back to me. I actually, in Chromospace, I actually say thank you. And I quote him. And, he basically said,
Wow.
The mechanical part of writing is the easiest thing. Right. Of course, for me, it was the hardest thing. I have terrible spelling and grammar problems. I've really been working really hard on that. But he said to me, I don't have a lot of time because I'm writing my books, but I did give a quick glance. I think I like some of the ideas here in the first chapter. And if this is your first time writing anything, I encourage you to move forward.
Wow.
Right. I encourage you to move forward.
Yeah, those are huge words.
That's huge.
Right. So
That's
I was,
huge.
I was very inspired by that. And it's great. Now, I don't want people to go to his, on Reddit and bury him and please read my book stuff. I mean, he didn't tell anybody that he read it. He didn't do anything about it. He just gave me a few minutes of his time. And that was super important to me. Another one of those steps in the process of getting this thing together and out that I never thought would happen, So
that's incredible. Congratulations. That is amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah.
That must have really enheartened you to, and it's funny. And it's not about, and I'm sure it's not about validation from, the big writer, right? It's just more that, like you said, someone took the time, and someone very credible took the time to say, hey, you know what? Yeah, this is, you got some potential here, and, keep going. And that little boost. And I think the biggest thing we have to do as writers, as creatives, as YouTubers is continue to boost people up the same way, because we never think we're at X level. And that's a good thing in some ways, because it keeps us humble and it keeps us hungry to improve. But at the same time, I've said this before, we don't realize there's someone looking up to us, right? That's just starting, or, and then you're thinking, oh, I'm a nobody or whatever. But someone is looking up to you to say, hey, oh, wow, if Megan or Taylor said this, it's like, oh my gosh, that would mean the world to me in terms of, making me feel that I could do it too, right? So,
And, just I have a personal experience recently with this where my channel reached over 1,000 subscribers because specifically because of Petrick. Yeah. Petrick makes videos, at least I think it's like twice a year, maybe more than that, where he shouts out smaller booktubers. And he does it because he genuinely wants to. It's not like, oh, here's some pennies. He doesn't have that vibe at all. He genuinely enjoys the creators he recommends. And I've always followed the people he talks about. And then he mentioned me. And when I tell you the growth, the growth on the chart was insane. And I reached out to him personally and just said, thank you so much. He's like, no, I mean, I think Steve said it best, when one person rises, we all rise together, So it's just so important people always say, don't forget where you came from, but it's just important to engage with people and let other people know about creators of stories that bring you joy, no matter, what level they're at.
And that approachability, and congratulations, Taylor, kudos, so well deserved. That was amazing. I
appreciate that.
And same kind of experience. I've had, people like Jenny Wirtz, who I still can't believe, that we're friends. That, you look at these people, Miles Cameron, said great, when they say good things about my book, I'm just like, are you sure you're, these are people
little old me,
me, and I look up to them. But it makes such a difference, and it makes such a difference for, for all of us, writers, creatives, like YouTubers, whatever, imposter syndrome is a real thing, right? And when you have those moments where you're doubting yourself, you're doubting whether or not anybody's listening, watching, anybody cares that what you're doing is making kind of an impact or a difference, or is it making sense just to get someone to read or look at the damn thing? Yeah, like it makes an immense difference. And you can look back and say, no, someone is, you know, and that means, you know, the world. So
Absolutely
Yeah,
does.
100%. Yeah. And you know, I just want to put this out for people who are watching this maybe in the future as well. If you consume, you know, media, be it YouTube videos or books or whatever, you know, you don't have to put it out there that you read it or consumed it. But any comment that you do make, we see it. Creators, we see it. You know, if you leave a review on Chrome Space, if you know you leave a comment, you know, under my video, or you know, tweet out at PL on Twitter, like creator, we see it. And that's what inspires us to continue. So, you know, people who comment on my videos, thank you so much. I know who's going to comment every time I post. And that's why I do it, because I know that interaction is coming. So I just want to shout out to people who keep us going too, because that's really key.
yeah, same. People who leave reviews, thank you. Golden. Golden reviews, you know, so-called positive or negative, are still gold. And it means someone's reading and took the time, spent their hard-earned time and money to read and buy my book and make a comment, and then the time to make a comment. And you know, feedback helps writers get better, helps creatives, regardless of whether they're writers, get better. And it doesn't have to be endorsing. You know, it's that's part of what helps us grow, especially because we're all striving for continuous improvement, right? We're all working towards being better, whatever that means. And you know, so that's the type of feedback that we need to keep getting better. And there's always that balance between, you know, writing your story or posting what you want to post and telling your truth, and but at the same time not being tone deaf to feedback, and potentially incorporating that feedback. You know, as the saying goes, if you know, if one person tells you something out of you know 100, it's like, okay, well, you take it and you absorb it and you note it. But if 50 people are telling you 100, maybe that's something you really need to pay attention to, right? So you know, that stuff is extremely valuable. So thank you. And I put out there for everyone, people that know me, you know, I obviously, like everybody else, I have this much time, but you know, if you need something from me, if you want to know something, if you know, want my opinion on something, if you'd like me to help you with something, if you're a video reader, like, I'd like to think that I'm someone who people do approach for that stuff. And if I can do it within reason, I'm here, man. So, you know, just hit me up. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to, you know, what I said, this is definitely on one of the videos, I think, with Taylor, that I'm not sure it was with Samia, like when people rise and shoot past me, that's what I'm aiming for, right? Because we're all standing on the shoulders of somebody else, right? So I want to see a writer that, you know, triples my reviews in a couple months, because potentially if I did something to help them, or you know, and then they shoot past me, right? Or you know, has more followers, or like that's what I love. That's what gets me jazzed. So,
well, I mean, fundamentally, we have to embrace the fact that we are not competing with each other. I know people say all the time that they're competing with each other, but we're really not. Right? This is that perspective. This is that blockbuster perspective. In the blockbuster perspective, yeah, I guess one person a year is going to buy a book, and if it's the biggest, hottest book, they're going to buy theirs. But none of us here are living in the blockbuster world. We're all in the long tail. We're all looking for the people who love whatever genre it is that we're writing stuff for. And in that case, those people will never stop buying stuff in that genre. We are not competing with each other. And the idea that, you know, we're here to help people, and someone might shoot up faster. Someone who appears on my show might become really big. That would be fantastic for me, you know? And yes, I would have rather been the person that became big. Sure. I mean, who doesn't want to be the person becoming, you know, the big person? But we all know that there's so much luck in this industry. There's so many people who work so hard, right? I'm going to shout out Aaron Gallagher again, because they have like 20 books. We've been doing this for 20 books now. And, you know, they've seen moderate success, but nothing significant, right? They're
Mhm.
not like they're not like Stephen King or something like that, right? You've probably never even heard of them. But they've written so much, and they've been prolific, and their stuff's good, and there's just so much luck that goes into this.
Mm.
I didn't even try querying my book. I've looked into what it takes to write a query and going through that process, and I said to myself, I don't even know if I can write a book. I'm just going to do it.
Mm.
I'm
Mhm.
going to, if I have to do every step of the way, like Vera said, have fun editing that. Yeah, I'm probably going to edit my own audiobook. I might have recorded it. I
Mm.
almost did my own cover for my book.
Mm.
But that's a bad idea. It's one thing I learned. People are talking about, like they did read a couple of books. Don't do your own unless you're professional, and even then, maybe not. Don't do the cover to your own book. Right?
I did want to comment on that. The cover is fantastic, by the way. As
Yeah,
soon
it
as
is.
I saw it, I was
Yeah,
like,
it is. It's awesome.
the color scheme, I was like, oh, okay. Because when people say you don't judge books by covers, like, they're lying. Everyone does. The covers are so important. So
Yeah.
yours is great. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I picked that. I am going to say this completely honest for all the people out there who may need to do this themselves. That is stock photography. That is a stock image by a very talented man. He's got tons of them. I have lined up the ones for the next couple of books so I can be consistent. Hopefully, if I can find, the consistent ones. If you go to my web space, chromospace.net, you'll see some of those. I use them in the background. And then I had a wonderful person on Fiverr, of all places. I paid her $50 to put together those images and those pictures and do all the stuff. It was great, and I can't believe I only paid her $50 for it, but people love it. I'm like, that's a fantastic cover. And it's tough to go find something you want to use for a sci-fi space novel, because what do you want to show? Right? I mean, my book is called Chromospace because it literally takes place in a world where space has a color. It's literally not, it's not black, right? I mean, light differences, closer planet, everything looks black, but it's really not, right? They're surrounded in this dense nebula of gas that's lit up by tons of stars out there. And so they're really kind of closed in, and you can't see out and you can't see in, right? And the background is always some color eventually, right? So I wanted something that was like, well, let's show space with different colors in it. But it turns out that's not evocative. Right? It's just not. It's going to look like every other sci-fi book out there. And so I went through all the stock photography, and I found these, and I paid to buy the rights to use them from whatever. And it's like a lot of things that this book thing taught me, is that it's not about the setting, it's about the characters. So I found a picture that really does look like Jacob out there. That's the main character of Chromospace. He's actually exploring, right? And he is in a ruined place, right? And there is a glowy person. So it lined up, and it was perfect. And that guy's amazing. I wish I could find it. I don't have it off the top of my head. But he's an amazing artist.
I can link it down below for people who are interested afterwards if you'd like. So I could definitely do that. Yeah. But I think it's important for people to be transparent, and I thank you for that, because just about how this process works. Because for me, when I look at cover art and stuff, the only people I hear talking about specifics about cover art are the big ones who hire like the Michael Whelans of the world and stuff, which that's incredible. If you can do that, by all means, give the man his due, give the man his money. But I think most people don't have the coin to do that. So if you're looking to put a nice cover on your book, how do I do that? I just, transparency, you can't demand it from people, but I appreciate it when people say that, because if I were to start writing a book today, I would know where to start.
Yeah, stock is your friend. Pinterest is your friend. There's so much you can do on the cheap, with just some creativity. And I think for most writers, I'd love to hear how Megan weigh in this, is that you typically have a concept or a theme or a scene in your book or something that just says, this needs to be on the cover, right? And that's what it becomes. And 99% of the time, you can probably find a couple stock images of the combination thereof to do that, right? You know, that said, it's always great, as you said, Taylor, if you can go in and get a really fantastic cover and get, you know, do the whole cinematic type, you know, cover like the Rob Hayeses of the world, or, you know, that they're just like, you go, oh my gosh, right? You know, the SPFBO self-published fantasy blog off cover contest just shows you, but a lot of those are stock. A lot of those are stock photos, and you know, some with some creativity, and you know, came with this bright idea, and they mixed and matched, and poof, right? You know, if you look closely enough, you can actually see in a cover contest, you might actually find not the entire image, but certain stock images that are actually identical.
Mhm.
And if you compare them, yeah, like that, oh, that's if because it's a different color, it's shrunk, it's smaller or bigger, it's put a different perspective, a different spot on the cover, but actually it might actually be the same image, which is kind of neat. So you know, that you
It's
can
kind
do
of
that.
like spot the difference in a fun way. I like that.
I'm trying to find the woman who did mine because she was fantastic. Rebecca Covers. That's what
Rebecca
it's
Covers.
it's Rebecca Covers on Fiverr. You go look at her. She's done a ton of amazing stuff. You know, gets back in a couple of days. No big deal. And I have some Photoshop skills. You know, back in college, I teach Photoshop classes and stuff and things like that. And I could have done it, and I did do, you know, a pass at it. But you know, there's plenty of people there that, you know, I found something much better. My friend actually did a like a late 80s style Bantam books kind of with the you know, the everything on it, the, you know, the old school cover for me as kind of a joke, and I thought that was fun too. But this definitely Rebecca Covers great on Fiverr.
Okay.
Yeah, good stuff.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, it is morning for me, and I do have a day that I need to do. So, but this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on, Megan. And you know, PL, you know, you are a steady host for this every time it comes up. But since it's on my channel, I'd like to have you do a sign out as well. But before we leave, if you guys can let people know who are watching, just one more time where they can find you in case they missed the intro before we head out. So, Megan, would you mind? Yeah.
Sure. Thanks for listening, everybody. My name is Megan Alnico. I am an author. I wrote Chromaspace. The first book is Conscript. So if you go to chromaspace.net, you can find out all about that book. It's available from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all those different places you could possibly want it. And I even sell it direct from my website. So if you'd like to give me all the money for the book, feel free to do that. It's a DRM-free version. And we also have a dyslexic-friendly edition. So if, you know, like I know what it's like. So if you'd like something printed in a font that is specifically targeted to people with dyslexia that should make it easy to read, I have that too. If you're into retro computing, I have an actual floppy disk image that you could write to a floppy disk and boot off your computer and relive the text-based BBS days. And read the books text-based. It is.
Oh my God, I love that.
PC-AT compliant. So if you know what that means, it means you just stick it in anything from like a 8088 computer. Wait a minute. No, you didn't. You need 286 or better. 286 or better. Pop it in that floppy drive, and relive the glory days of the internet before everything got crazy. If you like me talking today and like to hear me talk some more, you can go to wordcrash.org for my podcast. It's also available on Anchor and Spotify and every place that podcasts are released, because that's what Anchor does. It pushes it everywhere, including iTunes. And in fact, if you're an iTunes listener, I've sold almost as many issues of my book on iTunes as I had on Amazon. So thank you to all my Apple people who, for some reason, like the book. So if you like Apple, you might like the book. I don't know if those things are correlated or not, but it was cool. Anyway, so yes, I'm Megan. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks again so much, Megan, for coming on. You've just been such an amazing guest, and this started because of, you were so kind to invite me on Word Crash, which is phenomenal. And, so just so great to be able to sit down with you and, chat with you now. So I'm P.L. Stewart, again, author of John Kingdom Saga, www.plstore.com. That's where you can find all the books. Preferred social media platform, Twitter. I'm all over Twitter. I have other social media platforms, but I'm probably going to stop mentioning them even because, Instagram, I'm somewhat active, and Facebook periodically, but really Twitter is where you can find me. Again, if you have questions, you want to ask me questions about writing, you want to know about the books, you want to know me. Also, again, I'm on part of beforewegoblog.com. I'm an assistant editor there under the Beth Tabler, and you can find my reviews there. I also post them on Goodreads. And of course, I am honored to do, page chewing with the wonderful Steve Top's books and Taylor from A Between the Pages. This has been such an incredible, thing that's now become such an integral part of my life that I can't imagine not doing it. And where we get to, feature outstanding creatives and let people get to know about them. And I think that's what gives me a lot of joy. So once again, Taylor, thank you so much for hosting. It's been amazing.
No.
And, thank you.
I feel lucky when Steve was like, hey, you want to join the team of hosts? I was like, yes. Like, is that even a question? So just for those of you watching, if you're on this channel, you probably know who I am. But as PL mentioned, Steve from Steve Talks Books and PL are the people who started page chewing, and possibly in the future, I may continue to have some of the episodes on my channel. So please look forward to that. If you want to find me outside of YouTube, I am on Twitter. I do have an Instagram, but it's not book based really. So if you're looking for books, that's not the place to go. It would be more Twitter and YouTube. And I'm also part of Before We Go blog, run by Beth Tabler. And I'm also a SPIFBO judge. So you can be looking for that content coming out soon. I am in the thick of it, reading a lot of those books right now. So hopefully I can make content on that in the near future. But thank you so much for coming on and allowing me to host, and Vera as well, retroactively, if they end up watching this. But thank you everyone for watching. And I think that about covers it for everyone. Yeah. All right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
I just
ahead.
realized, I run a podcast and I'm always like, remember to tell people everything, right? Tell people your Twitter, your Instagram. You both did great. What did I forget? I forgot my Twitter. I'm at The Magnet Girl. So you can go find me at The Magnet Girl. And of course, I make mistakes, which you will not see in any of the Word Crash videos because I'll edit them out.
You know what? The honesty through to the end. You're just saying all of our secrets. How dare you? All right, guys. Thanks for watching. And look forward to talking to you guys next time. See you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.